All right, we are here on the webinar today about securing capital from passive investors for apartment syndication. And today we are going to be diving deep into this topic. And for those of you who do not know who I am Dan Handford. I'm one of the founding members of a group called PassiveInvesting.com. You can go to PassiveInvesting.com to find out more information about us as well as our team. If you want to find out a little bit more about me, you can go to this page here, click on my name. And for those of you who are joining us live, I will just type into the chat box so you have a link there if you want to go look at it after the webinar. And there's a nice little video here that talks about my personal life and also what we are doing with the group, with our group, PassiveInvesting.com. And then if you're interested in joining us on one of our future opportunities that we might have available coming up soon, you can go to the top right-hand corner and click on Join the Passive Investing Club. And when you click on that link, you will be able to fill out a form and it will allow us to jump on a phone call and have a conversation with you to see if you are the right fit for our group and vice versa, because not everybody is the right fit. But if we decide to, allow you to come join us on some of our future properties, we would love to have you there. So make sure you go there, find out more information. Just simply go to PassiveInvesting.com. Now, one of the reasons why we have been able to raise so much money with our group with PassiveInvesting.com is because we really know how to secure capital. Not only do we know how to raise capital, we know how to secure it, right? And that's the distinction I want you to think about today, is the distinction between raising capital and securing capital. And raising capital in my book is going out and trying to court or find investors to be able to bring into your acquisition, to bring into your fold, so that eventually when you have a deal, you can actually secure the capital. Now, I've done several videos on raising capital as well as kind of what to do with your investors between the times that you actually have a deal. And that's not what we're going to be talking about today. What we're going to be diving deep in today is the securing capital part, meaning you've been raising capital, finding investors, you've been courting them along the way, keeping in contact with them. It's been 6 months since you've had your last deal, and now it's time to go to business. It's time to raise $20 million on your next project, right? You have this $50, $60 million deal you're trying to take down, and you're trying to raise $20 million. How do you secure that capital effectively and efficiently so that you don't get bogged down by so much work and inefficiencies, and actually knowing which investors are interested in investing and which ones I have decided not to invest at this time? And this is a piece that earlier on, I've seen some groups try to put together a deal, and 2 weeks before closing, you call them up and say, hey, how's your raise going with your project? And they're like, oh, we got verbal commitments for all of it. And I'm like, well, how much money's in the bank? And they're like, well, none yet. And I'm like, well, you're 2 weeks before closing. You got to do something to get those verbal commitments into the bank account, right? Because you got to have that money secured up. I prefer to have the money secured as soon as I can. So usually we will set a deadline of about 3 to 4 weeks before closing for the investors to have a deadline to wire their money in. Because I never want to be 2 weeks or a week before closing and be scrambling trying to find where that next dollar is going to come from so I can actually close that project. And so this particular topic is all about what you're going to do to set that process up to effectively and efficiently obtain those commitments from your investors when you have your next deal. So that's basically what this first question is here. And some of you might be thinking, does he have a PowerPoint? No, I don't work off of PowerPoints. I really want to dive into this very deeply with you about what we're doing. And I'd like to have more of a conversation with you about it instead of just going off of a PowerPoint. So the process is very important to understand and use. And it's very similar to what I've discussed in the past about how you're actually going to be able to raise capital by putting people into your fold and start to communicate with them on a regular basis. So there's usually 3 different ways that we will announce a deal to an investor. So the first thing that we're going to do, which is the thing that everybody does right now, is they'll send out an email to their investor list. Now, if you're doing a 506B as in Bravo, you're going to want to make sure that you have a prior existing relationship with these investors, right? And then, of course, if you have a 506 Charlie, it's not as crucial for you. But either one of those, you want to have an email list that you can actually send out. And we've done a webinar on securities, on the difference between 506 Bravo and the 506 Charlie. So you can go back to our YouTube channel, search for it on there, and find a lot of videos that we've done around multifamily investing, including that securities discussion. So we won't go into detail with it today, other than to say, make sure you're careful about who you're sending these offerings to, and you're not sending it to a large, massive list unless you have a prior existing relationship with those investors. So you are going to send out, that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to send out an email to our investors to announce them the deal, right? And we have obviously a format that we use for sending out the email. We'll usually give some highlighted specifics. Usually the top banner is a picture of the property and our logo embedded in it, as well as maybe the property logo. And then underneath that's going to be a little bit of a background about the deal and why we like it so much. And then we're going to put a snapshot of the potential returns that they might be able to expect on it. And then we're going to announce a webinar that we're going to do on it. So I really, truly prefer to do a webinar format because what you can't do on a phone call is you can't show them the property. And so we take drive-through tours of the property as well as drone video footage of the property before we announce it before we do a webinar for an investor. And so while we're on that webinar with the investors for that property, we can show them that. And then the third thing that we do is we do a Google Maps tour. So we actually take the property on Google Maps, and inside of Zoom, you can do this where you can draw on the map at the same time, and you can show them exactly where the major employers are, or the major shopping, retail, restaurants are close to the property. And so you can actually get them to feel more comfortable with it. Because the more comfortable you can get an investor to feel about your asset and where it's located, the more they're likely to invest with you, right? If they're confused, they're going to always say no. You should write that down. A confused mind always says no, right? So they're going to probably say no if they're confused at where it's located, where the employers are, things like that. So the more you can make them feel comfortable with it, the better your outcome of being able to raise capital from your investors. So that's the first thing we do, is to send out the email, announce the webinar. And the webinar is usually 2 or 3 days after we announce the actual offering, right? And once we record that webinar, because we do record it, the next day we will send out a link to it. So again, they can have access to that. Now there's 2 other things that are simultaneously going on at the exact same time. Number one, we're going to be the same day, usually within an hour of releasing the deal, we're going to be sending out a text message to our investors, right? And those investors are investors that have said, yes, I want to receive a text message. Please send me one. And so that we can actually announce the offering to them via text message. That we don't bombard them with text messages. I tell them, like, we're only going to send you one text message after every announcement that we do for a deal, right? So, and it's not every email we send out. It's if we announce a deal today, they're going to get one announcement. That's it for that deal. And the announcement's pretty straightforward. It basically says, go check your email. We just released a deal. Let us know if you have any questions. And the reason why we did that is because we found that we only had about a 45 to 50% open rate. Now, anybody who knows anything about internet marketing knows, or email marketing knows, that's a really phenomenal open rate. But it's because these people have told us that they want to hear from us, right? So it's a very highly curated email list, where normally you would see probably 10 to 15% open rate in most email lists if you're lucky, right? But this email list is 45 to 50%. But I took a step back and said, 45 to 50%. Well, that means there's 50 to 55% of those people that are not opening that email. And at one point last year, I had an investor reach out to me, and they were upset because they missed out on a deal because their spam got caught, or my email got caught in their spam. And by the time they told me that they wanted to invest, it was already filled up. And so we had no more space for them to be able to get into the project. And so I wanted to make sure that the investors had multiple opportunities to make sure that we were touching them, to tell them we just released a deal. And so that's what we were doing. So that's what we started doing since then. Now, the third level that we're doing is we create a really nice offering memorandum for our investors so they can fully grasp and understand what's happening on an asset. On an acquisition, right? We want them to feel comfortable. So we take that next level to be able to design this package for them so they can fully understand it. But not only do we email that to them in the email, we also at the same time are printing that up. So we have a local printer here in Columbia, South Carolina, that takes our design files, prints it up in a nice perfect bound format that looks really nice. So if you ever have toured a property And the broker gives you this really nice printed brochure. It's really not a brochure. It's like a, 40, 50, 60 page document, full color, front and back, that really looks very professionally done. That's what we're doing. We're putting something like that together, and we actually mail that snail mail to every single one of our investors. So if you have watched me in a couple webinars ago, in my investor management section webinar, I talked about what we're doing from an investor management perspective. We're sending out a monthly newsletter mailed, not just email. We're mailing this to each one of our investors. And that mailed newsletter, one of the main reasons why we're doing that is so we can stay in front of them, and then also so that we can send them the offered memorandums of a deal once we have it available. And so that's happening all at the same time. Now, because of how quick it usually happens, the printed version usually is about probably 3 to 5 days later than the email that goes out, maybe even a little bit longer, up to a week. It's because it takes time to get them printed and cut and perfect bound and different things like that, and drop it in we usually send them out via priority mail so that they get it within 1 to 3 business days, right? Or mailing days. And that way they get it really, really quick. And it usually costs us about $6 to $8 to mail them out. And then of course it usually costs us about the same amount to be able to print them out, usually about $6 to $8. So we're looking at probably $15 to $20 full for each one of the investors that we send it out to, and we will mail it out to them. So those are the 3 things that we're doing to actually help to secure that capital. Now, that's how we announce it, right? That's how we're getting the investors aware of it. But what's next, right? What's next to make sure that we can get them to commit? So inside the email that we send out, we do that webinar, right? Well, one of the reasons why we do a webinar instead of just sending them a link to the webinar is that the webinar allows us to have a list of people that are interested in the asset, which basically means they likely have money right now that they can invest, and they are interested enough to register for that webinar. And so what that allows us to do is that allows us to be able to have a list of potential investors that we know are interested right now in investing. So most of the time, a lot of those investors have already submitted what we call a soft reserve on the asset, but some of them have not. And if they haven't, and they don't after the webinar, it gives our team a way to be able to follow up with those investors to see if they have any questions, so we can answer their questions. And we know that life gets busy, so sometimes things can fall through the cracks. So we'll follow up with those people. So it gives us like a really, really warm or really, really hot list of leads from our own investors that are interested in investing in that asset. But inside of that email will be a place for them to submit what we call a soft commitment. And that soft commitment is basically saying, hey, Dan, I have the money right now. Here's how much I want to invest, 100,000, 200,000, whatever it might be. Our minimum, a minimum is usually 50,000. So they might just put in 50,000. They'll say, I have 50,000 to invest right now, and I am interested, and please put me down on the list, right? And usually there's a limit to the amount of money we can raise on a deal. And so once we hit that limit, they have to go on what's called our backup investor list, which means if we get soft commitments that are over and above the amount that we need, which typically we actually like to have soft commitments that are about 15 to 20% higher than what we actually need, because we know some people are going to probably drop off. Things happen, they're reviewing the documents, they decide no, right? So there are some things like that that do happen that we have to take into account. So we try to raise over about 15 to 20% of what we actually need for the asset. Excuse me. So I'm going to stop here for just a moment. I know there's a question that came in. If you have questions as I'm going throughout this, feel free to type it into the chat box there. I know somebody typed into the actual, not the chat box, but the Q&A box. That's perfectly fine. I'll get to you there as well. And if some of you are wondering, yes, this is a big bottle of water. It's actually a gallon. So I'm actually working on drinking a gallon of water a day. So I'm a little bit far behind right now, as you can see. I'm supposed to be right about here, so I'm a little bit behind. So I have to keep on drinking. It's probably TMI. You guys don't really care, but thought I'd tell you that because I'm sure some of you are probably looking at that bottle of water going, man, that is not his typical bottle of water. It's usually about like 3/4 of that size. Or not 3/4, but a quarter of that size. Anyway, all right. So question here is, Justin legit has, do you feel there's any value to doing a live webinar after announcing the deal versus a recorded webinar? So I kind of touched on that earlier. I know you might have asked that question before I even touched on it. I think that might be the case here. But yes, I do feel like there is value in doing a live webinar. Not necessarily for the fact that that the investors are there live and they can ask us questions, because they know they can email us or call us, and we're always available to be on a phone call with them to answer any of their questions. But it also is, it gives us that list of people to be able to follow up with afterwards. So I think that's very important. Matter of fact, we closed a deal earlier this year in the middle of COVID. And one of the things that we did is we actually did, I think, probably 4, maybe 5 webinars throughout the process of that deal. And most of the time we only do one webinar, right? But because it was in the middle of COVID, there's a lot of questions. We decided to update the investors on the status of the property, the due diligence, the lease audit, demographic study to see what kind of risks there were for potential impacts from COVID. And we did 4 or 5 webinars on that particular deal. And after the first webinar, though, we only did pre-recorded webinars. So we would only send out a link to a webinar that we did so that they can be aware of what's the current status. And it was a very challenging time to raise money, but we did 4 or 5 webinars during that acquisition. Now, it was a pretty large deal. It was a $49.955 million deal, and we raised $19.4 million to acquire that asset. So that one took a lot longer than expected. It took about 59 days. I think the Lord has humor in that, because it took 59 days, but we closed on the 60th, right? So we're very, very stressful up until that day before. But on that 59th day is when we closed on that. I mean, it was when we closed out the raise on the project, and we were able to close on it the very next day. So it was a lot of work, but I think the webinars definitely had a major impact on the investors being able to do that. Is there a replay available for your webinar? Yes, Daniel, we will be having a replay available. The replay will likely be sent out on Monday, because we have a few things that we're working on today, and we're not going to be able to get it done today, but we will do our best to try to get it out over the weekend or Monday at the latest, so you have a recording to this. I know I do talk really, really, really fast, and I do have some other things that I need to get done today, which are very pressing on my plate, which I'm not usually this stressed out. I don't really want to say I'm stressed, but I have a lot of things I have to get done. So I'll be wrapping things up here probably in about 10 or 15 minutes. So next thing I wanted to cover here is before I talk about technology, because I know that's the next question on here, is how to set up an effective process, right, of securing the capital after you get the soft commitments. We talked about those soft commitments, and the soft commitments are now right? You have these soft commitments, but now what do, right? So you want to make sure that you have that PPM ready within at least probably 5 to 7 days after you release the deal, right? Because you want to give the investors enough time to be able to review, or you want to give them enough time to be able to review that document, so that if they have any questions, they can ask those questions to you, right? And after you have after you have gotten those commitments from the investors, you will want to send them out the PPM. And I'm going to talk about some software that we use to help with that, and also another piece of software that I think is a good tool as well to be able to do it. But the tool, I mean, not the tool, but once you send out that PPM, you want to make sure that you send them out an email to follow up with them to keep track of their status of that, right? So prior to actually using the software that we're using a software now called RealPage IMS, or I think they've changed it now to RealPage AIM. They actually have it all integrated into the system, where an investor submits a commitment, we can put it in the system, it automatically gets emailed to them. They have a chance to be able to review the documents, and then they can sign it all right there from within the system, right? But before we did that, we actually used DocuSign, and we were able to just send it out via DocuSign. DocuSign sends out reminders to the investors so that they can be aware of there's a pending document for them to be able to review or for them to put out. And once they have a chance to review that document, they'll sign off on it, and we'll get a copy of it. The investor will get a copy of it. And then it's a matter of keeping track of them submitting the funds. But let me back up for just a minute and talk about the verbal versus the submitting a soft commit via email. So the one investor that I was talking to you about, he got verbal soft commitments. Well, there's just something different about having somebody go through and fill out a form and pressing submit versus them just telling you over the phone that they're going to invest. Because I'm pretty sure you've probably met someone before as an investor and you said, would you be interested in investing? And they said yes, but they've probably never invested. And that happens all of the time. I would venture to guess that only about 10 to 15% of your investors will actually invest in a deal when you're in that securing, when you're in that raising capital phase. So you have an investor that says, yes, I'm interested. You put them on your email list. Only 10 to 15% of those investors will actually invest in that current acquisition, right? Not that they won't ever invest, but there's 10 to 15% at any given time will invest. So if you need $1 million and each one can bring $100,000, that means you need 100 investors telling you that at a 10% close rate, right? On those investors that have $100,000 a piece. So keep that in mind, that you need to have a good expansive network of investors so that you can raise a significant amount of capital. Now, the next thing I wanted to cover was about the software, right? The software that we are using is a software, like I said earlier, is called RealPage IMS. And it makes your life so much easier because it keeps track of, even after you close on the deal, it keeps track of your waterfalls, keeps track of your distributions, it's a document portal that has all of your documents, and investors can update their ACH payment information, and you can create NACHA files to be able to upload to your bank to be able to process those distributions. It just makes your life a whole lot easier, right? But during that securing capital phase, it is a lot easier too, because you now have a dashboard that tells you who has submitted those soft commitments, who is still waiting to be able to review the PPM, and once they've signed the PPM, who are you still waiting on for funds, right? And so you have that easy way to be able to keep track of those investors. Now, the other tool, there's another tool that maybe you're not at the stage right now where you need or you really want to spend the money on a portal, right? In the beginning, we didn't do that, right? We actually waited until we had 10 assets under management before we actually started with a portal. And the portal was definitely needed, and it was a game changer for us. But in the beginning, we didn't necessarily need it, honestly, nor did I want it, because I knew it was going to be a lot of extra work for us. But one of the tools that we use, that we customize for ourselves, is a software called Airtable. Now, you might have heard of Airtable before, but if you have not, this is a tool. I'm going to type it into the chat box here. Yes, it is an affiliate link, but no, I don't charge for this webinar. So if you would do me a favor, go to Airtable, register for an account and sign up and play around with it. I get a little referral fee. So full disclaimer there. So there's a link in there for those of you who are doing it live. Obviously, if those of you who are watching it on the recording, you're not going to get that referral link, but that's okay. At least I was able to help you out one way or another. But this actual, this tool, this Airtable tool, is a tool that we use for our deal flow to keep track of it between our partners, between our team, but also it has an investor relations tab to it that we have used since the very beginning, right? And each one of our investors are in there. We can keep track of a lot of different things in there, and it allows you to be able to have the ability to look at, like, we have information in there about who the investor is, how they're going to be investing, whether it be an entity, a self-directed IRA, individual, trust, etc., what their soft reserve amount was, and how much money we actually received. There's inside of this Airtable, you can actually, import your files. So if you have PPM files, you can load all of them in here. ACH updates, everything's in there. You can have information in there about bank account information, about where you're going to make distributions, their emails, the types of funds that you received from them, the date you received those funds, where that investor, the state of that investor, where they're located, their tax IDs, whether they're accredited or sophisticated. And we built this out. It also has a formula in there where you can keep track of the ownership percentages. And we built out this tab that allows you to have this kind of dashboard. And you can go in there and create all this stuff yourself. And that's what we did from the very beginning. We just thought back, we're like, what are all the different items that we're going to need when we're bringing on an investor? We just started laying out these different tabs inside of here. And for those of you who are our inside of our MFIN premium program, you get access to this template. So you can, any of you on here can register for the Airtable and do it yourself. But if you're a premium member, you get access to this template that allows you to be able to just import this into your, what they call bases, and you can just plug and play it. And we also make that available for our MFI and premium members to have the deal flow spreadsheet too. That deal flow spreadsheet allows you to kind of see all of those different things. Actually, let me see here. I might actually have a template that I can share on my screen so you can actually see what this looks like. Yes, I actually do. Let me see if I can do this. All right. So let me share my screen here, resume. So you should be able to see my screen here. This is a fake property, a fake investor. None of this stuff is actually what it appears to be, right? But you can see we have, if you have any co-GPs on your properties, you can list them here. If you have any investors, you can list them here. But as you are adding them, these we can fill out. Any investor distribution accounts you can put in here. Has investor, the ACH types, whether it be they want an ACH deposit or a mailed check. The bank name, the depository bank name, the ACH routing number, their mailing address, the account numbers, account types, and the account types can be checking your savings. You need to know that for ACH. And of course, the property name and will actually be populated in here as well. And so these are going to be the actual properties that we will, this is actually the property that you would see. You can change this. You can also rename this table or duplicate it. But inside of this is a fake property. We have the investor's name, the state, the investor type, accredited versus non-accredited. And all this information is changed within the investor's account, which will be listed here. And you can change that to accredited or sophisticated. You can keep track of the co-GP that brought that investor in, email, phone number, address, right, somewhere there. Any of the investor wire accounts are attached to it, and then any properties that are linked to it as well. And then, of course, the other thing I like about it is, as you can see on the right here, that any activity that is happening on it, you can see is actually being tracked here. So if somebody changes something, it always keeps track of it right there. You can also go in here and tag another member of your team to look at something on this account. You can do that as well, which is kind of cool. Investors, the only difference about a portal of this is that investors don't get access to this. So you can't share this with an investor. This is only for your internal team. But we can keep track of here any type of contact information for the investor, but also you can see their soft reserve, how much received, the received date, the type of funds we received, whether it was a wire or a check, whether or not we notified the investor that we received it or not gets put here. And then after the first distribution, we put this in here as well. We tell them we want to make sure that we call each investor on that first distribution to see, did they receive it or did they not? And that's where we do that there. Just another level of higher touch investor relations. Their tax ID, the type of investor, so individual, entity, trust, self-directed IRA, joint. So you can see it's all kind of built out here, whether or not their PPM is signed or filed or whatever. So this is a very, very cool tool to be able to use. And I would highly recommend, whether you are one of our MFI and premium members or not, you can actually go on there and actually see how this thing actually works. So feel free to do that, to go on there and actually register for an Airtable account. You can create all these tabs yourself. I don't really care. If you're a premium member, we'll give it to you as well. We haven't actually tried to promote or push the premium program very much. So some of you might on here be like, what's the premium program? What's that? You can go to mfinpremium.com and check that out. And you can see more information about it. Like I said, I have not really pushed it very much, but you can go to the mfinpremium.com and click on the you have to enter your email here. And once you enter your email, you can click on access the exclusive membership content, and it'll share with you what's included with that. It's not a very highly costly program or anything like that, but you can certainly check it out. If you're interested, we'd love to have you a part of that program. All right. So I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover with you today. So let me see if there are any questions that are coming in. Let's see, a couple of them coming in here. Do you have to explain to your investors that additional funds may be needed to cover COVID reserve guidelines? So thankfully, we always have plenty of operating reserves, James, so that we haven't had to have that conversation with them. They obviously know that because of the potential COVID reserve guidelines that we might have to dip into the operating reserve account to be able to pay for some of those. But so far, we've had plenty in that in the underwriting for the operating reserves that has not been an issue. Another question coming in here. Christian is asking, how are you growing your base of investors to be able to send them these types of webinar invites and ask for soft commits? So that's the difference between raising capital and securing capital. Today, Christian, we were talking more about securing capital. So once you have your investors, how do you secure the capital? How do you actually get them to commit? So we've done another webinar already on we've already done a webinar on raising capital or finding investors. So if you go to our YouTube channel, let me see if I can actually provide you with a link to a list of those videos on our YouTube channel, because I would highly recommend that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, because I try to provide a lot of value through the YouTube channel on a lot of these various topics. And for those of you who are on here and have been following me, you can attest to that as well. But let me see if I can go on here and find the video on raising capital that we've done. I've done a couple of them actually over the years, but I did one a couple months ago, I believe, actually I did one 3 months ago. So I'm going to type a link in here to those of you who are watching live, and you can click on this and see. And let me just resume here and share. You can see here that I just went to our YouTube channel, just typed in here in the chat box, raising capital. Here's one from a year ago. Here's one we did 3 months ago, raising capital. Did another one 10 months ago. So several videos in here around securing capital. And so raising capital. So you can go in here and do that. And then of course, I'd love for you to subscribe to this channel to kind of be aware of the future videos that we actually put together on this. Because I know that you'll really find a lot of value with that. So going back to the question list, let's see here. Did you edit all these columns yourself on the spreadsheet, or is this all pre-made with the program? No, it's not pre-made with the program. You can certainly edit the columns yourself and add these to it, of course, just like we did. It's no problem at all. Just use that, you can just add all those in there if you want to yourself. It's pretty easy to do. Let's see, please copy and paste the premium link into the chat. So let me type this in here as well, so you have it. You can go to MFIN Premium, premium.com. So I'll just type it in there. Hopefully when you click on that, it'll pop up. Yep, it definitely did. I just clicked on it to check it. So MFINpremium.com. And let's see, there's actually a few videos, yes. And then if I have a project, can we work together to raise capital needed to build the building? So no, Daniel, we don't actually do any of those types of projects. We do all of our own projects, and we're the main operator and raise capital only for our deals. So there are other people that are like that. So if you want, I would highly recommend that you go to our Facebook page. And once a week, we have a self-promo post where if you wanted to find another partner or something like that, you certainly could do that. Let me actually type into the chat box. If you go to facebook.com and under groups, type in Multifamily Investor Nation, you can find our group. Right now we have 6,600 members in this group, but you have to fill out some questions to join. So inside of the chat box here, I just typed in a link to a group. It's not a paid group. You can get into it for free. And there's a lot of people in there that are looking for people just like you to help, that they can help partner with. So you can go there, not subscribe to it, but I guess join that, and we'll get you access to that. For people like myself who can't invest currently, but who expect to have more funds in the next year or so, do you think it's better to go ahead and join your investor club to establish a relationship with you, or to wait until I'm actually ready to invest? Well, one of the benefits of joining our passive investor club as a passive investor is that you'll be able to be educated with through a lot of the materials that we give to our investors. So you'll become more familiar, more educated with it. And there are a lot of investors right now that are on our list that maybe aren't ready right now, but they know in the next 3 to 6 months, they're going to have some money, or in the next year that they can be able to invest. And we're able to educate them along that process. So we do have a lot of investors that are like that. So I always recommend, even if you want to get into this space actively, that you should first invest passively. That's what I did when I got started. I invested passively. And right now my wife and I are in 26 different passive multifamily investments across the country. And it's been great. It's been a great experience to learn all that. And that's with 9 different operators, right? So it's not just with us, not just with one operator, it's with 9 different operators. So I would highly recommend that you try to do that first. Let's see. Yes, Jeffrey's asking about the premium members. That spreadsheet is available to the premium members. How long did it take to establish your investor network? So I would say before we raised a significant amount of money, When I say significant, the first significant amount of money that we raised was just over $2 million. It was $2,025,000. We were about, I'd probably say 8 months in. We're about 8 months into building our authority platform and really getting a lot of investors under our fold. The next deal that we raised for was actually less than that. It was actually just over $1 million. And then the next deal after that, we raised $7.2 million. And then we had another smaller deal that we raised about a little over $1 million for on that one. And then we went to 8.5 million after that. And then we went to 14 million. And then we went to 20 million. So almost 20 million. So we're 19.4 million, which is the most recent one. And we're in the process of putting some deals together and underwriting deals that are going to be over 20 million. So probably closer to like 24, 25 million. So it's been a pretty fast progression, but it's because we've been consistent. And I would suggest that you go back into our YouTube channel and look for the webinar I did on investor management, because they'll teach you a lot of the things that we've done along the process here. All right, I'll take one last question here and we will get going here. Thank you, Dan, for the comments there. Glad to answer those questions. Do you continue to contact potential investors all the time for them to be ready when the deal is secured? If so, do you pre-qualify them with the soft commit form? So they're not really necessarily pre-qualified with the soft commit. They're pre-qualified before they even get put on my investor list. So that is, Caesar, one of those things that I would suggest you going to the YouTube channel. And let me see if I can just find this one, because it was actually under investor management. I know a couple of you had that question for us. So I'm going to type this into the chat box here. You can see I'm going to resume my screen. Is this video here called Investor Management for Apartment Syndication? I would highly, highly recommend you going through this video, because I dive into a lot of details about what we're doing with our current and potential investors, right? Because a lot of people just go find investors and they don't talk to them until they have a deal. Well, they forgot about it. And they're like, who are you, right? Well, our investors won't forget us. We put a process and a system in place so that they will not forget us. Okay. All right. So hopefully I was able to answer your questions and provide some value to you. I appreciate each one of you being on here and being attentive. Next week, we're going to have another webinar. This next webinar is going to be right here on your screen. It's the importance of understanding cap rates in apartment syndication. So this is going to be next Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern, which is when we normally have our webinars. This week, I had a few things come up, so I had to move it. I appreciate you guys being flexible like that. We're going to be talking about what is a cap rate and how is it calculated? Should you buy in high cap rate or low cap rate markets, and why? What are blue chip corporations and why are those types of corporations significant to cap rates? And then also going to kind of dive into the power of the cap rate. So if you would like to register for this webinar, you can actually go to this link. Let me actually give you the proper link to go to. And we will also send out an email to this so you are aware of it. But for those of you who are joining us live, you can go to this link, which is right up here, multifamilyinvestornation.com/MFIN webinar. And I will be talking to you about this, the importance of understanding cap rate. So you can do that. And we look forward to having you on our next webinar. And for those of you who have just joined us, make sure you join us, subscribe to us. I'm looking forward to having you follow us in the future. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week.